This video contains spoilers. Hilda Season 3, Hilda Season 3, Hilda Season 3. It's here. I watched it. Why wouldn't I? But before we talk about the rest of the season, I just want to go over one specific episode, the Fairy Isle. I'm really trying hard to not exaggerate too much when I say this, but this might actually be the single greatest thing to come out of the franchise ever. If this episode was its own movie, even though it pretty much is given the runtime, honest to God, I would actually put it right next to Oppenheimer. No, I can't do that. Next to, in between Killers of the Flower Moon and Godzilla -1, maybe? Or am I being too generous because this is a show that I haven't stopped talking about for the past 5 years now? Maybe, but fuck you, this is my channel, I can do whatever I want. But yeah, the Fairy Isle. It can be truly magical just how amazing something can be had everyone just came together and put on one last big show to end it all. And this episode is exactly that. I have never felt such a roller coaster of emotions going into something like this before. It went from just Hilda going on a mission to rescue her dad to then feeling like you're going to be stuck on some kind of world that you didn't want to be in, to Johanna literally dying ish. There was so much attention to detail here that if I were to take a deep dive into everything in this episode, it would probably take me like 3 hours to get through at most. Victoria Van Gale coming back was something that I predicted all the way back when season 2 was out, so that wasn't really much of a surprise at all. But what was a surprise to me was Hilda basically being cool with her again? Whatever happened to trying to get her to not be in this strange world? I don't like how the episode doesn't really address that in any way, but she's cool, I guess, so it's more of a minor inconvenience, I guess. And she saved Astrid from sacrificing herself from this Bellows, Molly McGee, chairman-ass person thing, so it's all good. The interaction between Hilda and Johanna throughout this episode was so incredibly sweet and heartwarming, and I absolutely adored the fact that they decided to include this child version of her as well to tell us that at the end of the day, Johanna is still very much like Hilda in a lot of ways. She's adventurous, wild, free, and very much doesn't want to leave her family behind just as much as Hilda doesn't. Which makes it all the more heartbreaking to find out that she was forced out of the truth because Astrid didn't want her to have the pain that came with seeing your own family being taken away from you. So while that may have only worked temporarily, as the episode goes, you can only keep so many secrets forever. And it was absolutely painful to see this conflict go out because on one hand, Hilda understandably is eager to get back home to the place where she and everyone else who has ever loved her is. But Johanna doesn't want to leave the people who she grew up and was raised from. I have never seen a TV show develop this great of an issue, and not only does it succeed in what it wants to do, but also excels at it. Especially in the case of Johanna, the fact that we are able to see the side of her means that we finally know just how deep the family is connected to and why it was important that we had to know now rather than later. It finally gave us some answers that we have been waiting for, like the fact that Hilda isn't unsurprisingly full human, or why Hilda has that blue hair in the first place, or why the family in general was just never really talked about much until now. It's because even Johanna herself didn't know anything about it. And let's just talk about how absolutely beautiful these environments are. Despite what the concept art may have suggested, Fairy Country is an absolutely beautiful place, and I really don't blame Johanna for wanting to stay in there more. The scene where they showcase these flashbacks to Johanna and Hilda's family were also really thought out and great too. And Frida and David actually play a role in actually helping Hilda. Sort of. But the difference between this and the Mountain King movie is that they don't take that much of the runtime, and when they do appear on screen, it feels satisfying because they actually do manage to help her out through Twig. So it's not like they were just there for nothing. And overall, for a series finale, I just really appreciated how they spent less on trying to be anything other than a series and absolutely beautiful and heartwarming into a show that will always have a soft spot in my heart for many years to come. The most absolutely heartbreaking scene in this has absolutely got to be the part where Johanna is seen dead, lying cold and out on the floor as if everything she's ever done, everything she's ever achieved, and all she did to help her only child, gone in an instant. This has definitely got to be the darkest scene by far in the entire series, because at least in scenes with the Deer Fox in the 50-Year Night episode, you had something like dialogue to accommodate the sad feeling that comes with feeling like you're about to lose someone close in your life. But no, they just sit there in complete shock and sadness, even if it was just for a couple seconds. It was enough time that, for me at least, triggered a need to just break out and cry right then and there. All that time, all these adventures, those very few seconds were enough to make you genuinely feel the pain and suffering that came with feeling like you've lost everything. But let's be for real here, they would never kill anyone off the show. Well, almost anyone. The end of the episode with the bird parade was also really great too, because even if it was done briefly, they brought back some of the characters we've been dying to see, like Tildy, Damara, Bellkeeper, which I find funny that they decided to make him bump into Hilda's actual dad. Oh, and of course, you know who. Don't let this be the last. Yeah! Yo! Let's go! Let's fucking go! Good to see you, kid. Yeah! What a fucking roller coaster of emotions that this episode hits you with, while managing to be a beautiful, breathtaking end to a series that I and many others who have loved the show for so long will absolutely never forget and only appreciate more as time passes by. Oh yeah, I still have to talk about the rest of the season. Yeah. I'm sorry to tell you guys, but Season 3 in general was kinda, mid. Yeah, and I really hate to say that, because as someone who has absolutely loved the shit out of the past 2 seasons, I honestly think that Fairy Isle should have been its own dedicated movie and just leave Season 3 out of the picture entirely. Before I get into my criticisms about it though, I guess I should start off with the episodes that I think are great, which is not a lot. The Giant Slayer is by far the best episode out of the entire season if you were not to include the Fairy Isle. First of all, Woodman returns yet again with a spectacular performance as always, and also being the funniest and best part of the episode, as always. And I really love the idea that they went back all the way to Season 1 to re-explore and reimagine the time where all the giants once wandered around Earth, only to then jump back into space, nowhere to be found again. It's epic, really funny, and overall a great and very much entertaining time to watch. Even with the Giant Slayer kid is someone I really like, since over time you sympathize with how he feels and why he does what he does. And that's something that I really like, because for some reason, not a lot of movies or shows tend to even bother with that. The Laughing Merman is another example of an episode in which I very much loved and enjoyed. Hilda in musicals is not something I would have ever expected to go together, but not only did it go together well, it went pretty fantastically. Despite what the characters in the show say, Eugene's songs are pretty damn catchy and memorable. And honestly, I just really like him a lot. And he also makes for such a memorable, great, and surprising villain to the story.
How about another joke, Murray?
No, I think we've had enough of your jokes.
What do you get?
I don't think so.
When you cross a
we're
mentally
done
ill
with your
loner
jokes.
with
That's
a
it.
society that abandons him and treats him like trash!
Call the police,
I'll
man.
tell you what you get!
Call the police.
You get what you fucking deserve!
Eugene might actually just be one of my favorite characters in the show now, so it's a little disappointing to know that this will very likely be the last and only time we'll ever get to see him. It was also pretty strange how they decided to just throw Louise out of the picture entirely as well, even after she made that whole big speech about wanting to be friends with the freaky people or whatever she said. I can't say that sounds so wrong. But maybe that was for the better, since I don't know how much of the story would even be affected if she was there regardless anyway. As for the rest of the episodes, they range from either pretty okay to actually pretty bad. The Train to Tofoten is a slow, if otherwise cute and solid start to the season. The Fairy Mound is a confusing and all-around kind of messy way to introduce us to it. My main gripe about it is that it largely just felt too weird, eerie, and uncomfortable as a Hilda episode. It's like what they did with the Ghost episode, where the writing feels really strange and out of place, and after watching the Fairy Isle episode, I can totally understand why that was the case, but I just think that they should have done a better job at hinting what was to come and questioning the secrets that they're so obviously keeping us from. And so with that in mind, it just makes this episode feel more like a prelude to that episode rather than anything noteworthy on its own. The Job is actually a pretty good episode for the most part, since this is the episode where we're introduced to Hilda's dad. Yay! And while I think in that aspect of the episode it felt a little underwhelming, at the end of the day it still felt like a really fun and exciting Hilda episode. And obviously a lot of fun seeing Hilda and her dad interact for the first time. The Forgotten Lake is an episode that I thought I was going to like because it seemed like it was going to go back to basics and just have us be reeled into the simple yet wholesome story where Hilda and her mom just hang out for a while. Until this motherfucker shows up.
So here's this giant enemy.
Spider.
And yeah, that's kind of where the entire episode basically derails. It just felt like the entire second half was just dedicated to nothing more than just trying to get rid of this thing whilst providing nothing new or interesting to the table. Most of the time I couldn't even hear what this dude says because he sounds like the literal equivalent to Venom.
I'm surprised you preying on innocent people, and we will find you.
And unlike the part where Joanna dies for a brief second later on this season, the way that they even attempted to make the scene sad in any way just feels pretty pathetic. Again, we've been known that none of these people dying in here, and the fact that they even had the balls to even grasp at the idea of making friends with this thing, like hell fucking no! This is the type of shit that Amara would put inside people's nightmares. Ain't nobody trying to mess with this thing. And we're supposed to feel all sympathetic and happy and shit about it after he literally didn't just try to eat us 5 seconds ago. It literally reminds me of that one SpongeBob episode, A Pal for Gary, where SpongeBob just doesn't care at all for the fact that his pet is being eaten alive right then and there. Though, credit where credit is due, at least Joanna and Hilda do actually see the threat that comes with this creature. Still not a good episode though. And finally, Strange Frequencies. Why does this episode exist? Why couldn't they just add all this stuff about decoding radio waves or finding out that Hilda's dad and Victoria are in trouble into at least the episode before or in the Fairy Isle episode itself? There is absolutely no need to make an entire episode dedicated to a plot that just goes absolutely nowhere. They spend all this time trying to deal with the Nissa and how to fix their problems, and even though they do end up solving something by the end, the entire episode just feels like it was made solely for the reason of just progressing the story by adding in some of those other details as well. It's not bad, I don't think, but it just feels like a waste of time for what otherwise should have been at least a small B-plot included for effect, at the very least. I love Nissa as much as the next person, but I don't think we needed another episode dedicated to them, especially since we already have at least 3 in total. Just why? Why would they even bother making this? If there's anything else I have to say about the season that I kind of dislike about, I don't really like Gregor Simpson here very much. It's not very funny, and honestly I question why it's here in the first place if all it's going to do is be a poor gag character. I'm honestly really disappointed that David continues to be the butt of the joke as a character instead of developing him more seriously. And overall, there was a lot of potential that could have been done with this new season, but as was the case with the Owl House, it's thanks in part to the fact that the amount of episodes was cut so short. I also just did not like how they tried to explore more with the horror aspects of the show, since in cases like the Fairy Mound and the Forgotten Lake, it just felt very out of place and not at all something that should even exist in a show like this in comparison to like the Nightmare Spirit. In the end, I'm still really glad that I decided to check this season out because even in the worst episodes, they all still managed to have some great and fun moments and surprises to look after for. And as I've said, that series finale was absolutely perfect in concluding the story of Hilda that we have loved for so long. I know this review may lead some of you to believe that I just won't like Hilda anymore because of this, and I won't continue to be a fan in some way, but that's absolutely not the case. I'm sorry for being one of those YouTubers who have to bring this show up specifically, But the reason why I abandoned Star vs. the Forces of Evil entirely was the fact that, as a whole, it was just kind of dropping off into an endless void of mediocrity. And you know how well that series finale went, so I'm not even gonna bother saying anything about that. Hilda is different because thankfully for most of its time on Netflix, it's always been mostly great. Season 1 was great, Season 2 was great, the Mountain King movie was great, and while Season 3 as a whole may not have been as spectacular as I was hoping for, in the end, it still managed to give us some of the best episodes and moments out of the entire series, so honestly, that's way more than enough to make me feel satisfied with what I got. It's just that unfortunately, I don't think I'll even bother to rewatch most of the episodes that we got since it overall just feels really underwhelming and unremarkable. Real quick, I'm just gonna go over the scores here. The Train to Tofu 10 is a 6.5 out of 10, the Fairy Mound is a 5 out of 10, the Giant Slayer is a 10 out of 10, the Laughing Merman is an 8 out of 10, The Job is a 7 out of 10, The Forgotten Lake is a 4 out of 10, Strange Frequencies is another 5 out of 10, and of course the Fairy Isle is a very, very strong 10 out of 10. And as for the season as a whole, I originally was going to give it a 5.5 out of 10, but after thinking about it some more, I don't think it's quite at that level where I can truly consider it to be mediocre, so my final score for Hilda Season 3 is a 6 out of 10. So what do you guys think about Hilda Season 3? Did you love it? Hate it? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a video. Peace!